Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth, the Education Coordinator for Marlene's Market and Deli. Tonight's special guest we have with us is Dr. Timothy Sobie. He is a physical therapist and has got his PhD. Thank you so much, Dr. Sobie, for joining us.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
And you are going to be discussing a really important topic, which is Fitness Resolutions 101.
Well, very good. Yes, it's the time of year where, maybe a quarter of the way into our first month of 2022, which I'm cautiously optimistic about under the conditions and whatnot. So what I'll go ahead and do is, with the audience, maybe I could, assess that and assume and presume that most of you are clients of Marlene's Market and Deli, the predecessor to many things great. And I've actually done workshops and classes in previous years that were on site at a time where we could get audience attendees to consent and volunteer for demonstrations. And I guess because of the Zoom platform, I guess I'll be demonstrating, but there might come a point where if some of you are confident or okay with switching on your camera, I can monitor your movement, because a lot of this isn't so much about prescribing techniques to adhere to as it is to maybe find something to discover in yourself that can highlight an intrinsic motivation to move more in 2022, moving within yourself. Okay, so how about if I go ahead and pull up my screen here, and what I need to do, I need to share my screen and do that technical aspect of Zoom coordination. All right, so let's go ahead and share my PowerPoint. Let me go ahead and go from the beginning. Can everybody see my screen? I am sharing the screen that says Fitness Resolutions 101. So here we have a scene of people walking back and forth. This is like an overhead camera from maybe Marlene's Market and Deli. One person's walking across. Where's that new supplement for focus? And the other one's looking for the supplements on energy. Maybe some others for weight loss and energy. So that's just, again, sort of how things look. Myself, if I'm walking, I'm looking for the homemade soup, which I miss, and I need to go ahead and visit again sometime. So let's go ahead and move on forward. And that was just sort of a slide that came out of Microsoft's, templates. And I thought, well, that's neat. People are walking. That's one start. One start to New Year's resolutions 2022. So Statista is a statistics analytical firm that conducts research and population surveys, averages them out, statistical inferences and reporting. And the top New Year's resolutions for 2022, 48%, almost half, to exercise more. After that, 44% to eat healthier, 41% to lose weight, and then spending more time with family and friends, being more economical. This is all positioned great for Marlene's Market and Deli. They've already covered the first 3 to 4. And then they're spending less time on social media, which is very new to me still, and reducing stress on the job, which has all been transitioning. And then finally to quit smoking. And, that is still something that happens. We flash back to 2021, look at the same list. Number 1, exercise more. 2, eat healthier. It's pretty much the same list. So it's interesting that these recur. Might that beg the question that maybe how often are we able to adhere to and keep and retain our resolutions? Every year, millions of Americans make New Year's resolutions, but by February, maybe 80% of them just haven't happened. And conventional psychology and maybe cognitive behavioral psychology will recommend, tools and motivational interviewing to have you check into yourself and find your own answers, and then have you make a checklist of goals, another step yet. And goals are like still in the future. Maybe there's a way to experience in the present. And then here, maybe another set of ideas. There's 5 reasons why maybe New Year's resolutions fail and how to avoid failing again. Maybe you're biting off more than you can chew. Your goals are too big. maybe they're too generalizable. You're not setting milestones or maybe short reward systems within each to break down the global task into components. Maybe you're not tracking your progress and measuring it. If it can't be measured, it's not being quantified. You won't know if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And so you're counting your steps, Fitbits, all those kinds of things. Maybe your purpose isn't compelling enough. You're just adhering to a cultural meme of, yeah, I'm gonna exercise this year and lose weight, da, da, da. And maybe there's something more intrinsic and deeper meaning that needs to be accessed through self-inquiry in a different way. And then maybe you're not writing them down. If it's not written, it's not done. Those are all conventional wisdom things. You know, I've heard 5 of these items before, maybe many of you have, but a lot of times they're still sort of, I don't know, maybe paternalistic kind of hierarchical recommendations of should implications, right? And maybe some of these steps that we do outside our body in daily life are extrinsic to our being, not intrinsic to our feeling. And so maybe there's another way to motivate change that happens much the same way that we learn to walk. There were no directive manuals on how to learn to walk in infancy, developmentally. We discovered the process of walking through trial and error and following our interests to get from point A to point B and have a reward that was intrinsic and dreamlike, more than likely at that level of infant consciousness that these adult fragmentations seem to not coalesce with all the time. So going back to this top New Year's resolutions list of 2022, you know, to exercise more is first on the list and to quit smoking is on the other. And maybe those tie together. Certainly if we're, you know, not smoking, we can probably exercise easier and vice versa. But the idea of not exercising and sitting for a sustained time has been the recent cultural meme of just noting that sitting is the new smoking. And we hear that a lot, the sedentary lifestyle impacting. Here we all now are sitting at our Zoom meeting. And we probably sat at lots of Zoom meetings. So part of what's going to happen very soon, we're going to be up from our chairs standing and then back in our chairs again. But to show that the chair is not a parking lot for sitting static and idle, but maybe a potential platform from which to make little micro shifts through our day and then get up and walk and have that maybe a readiness to get up and take breaks. You know, and maybe a lot of our technology, we look at caveman paintings, all these Paleolithic drawings of bison and fellow man and tribes. And then we get down to maybe what papyrus in Egypt and scrolls. That's a little bit of movement. And then we're down to maybe pencil and paper and that type of writing communication. Then the computers, and now with our not PDA devices, but smartphones, right? And so everything's gotten kind of constrained in our languaging. And I'm aware of this Paleolithic diets of eating like our ancestors, or maybe more whole food, less processed food kinds of diets. But maybe our movement, our quality of movement has maybe become something we've taken for granted and maybe over-processed. Maybe a lot of fitness crazes or fitness fads and trends are kind of compromised by being overly processed in some way. You know, the muscle of the month, usually more cosmetic than functional. The glutes, abs, all these muscles that get segmented out. So this takes us to the idea that maybe then rather than following advice, let me go back. You know, there's lots of advice about what to do, how to sit, how to stand, how to exercise. And a lot of times these posture advice constraints is adding another vice, adding vice, add vice is adding a vice. So we're constrained to maybe an external expectation to follow, but maybe there's the internal messages that are left out. And there's this idea that rather than develop New Year's resolutions, maybe immersing oneself in New Year's experiences that can habituate our physiology, our psychology, our whole being to be and do something that feels different, that behaves different. And so that's cultivating a new set of habits. The thing about habits is we need to have an apprenticeship of experience to learn new skills and new tasks that become habituated, so we don't have to learn all the stepping stones again. It's more automatic for us. However, a lot of the automated habits and behaviors you've acquired might be useful in one context, but not transferable to others. And for sitting posture, we're so habituated and impervious to our arrangement. I bet that those of you who are participating tonight are probably in a Zoom posture. Just notice where your head is, where your eyes are, where your periphery is compared to your focus. If there's a group of people, there's a certain Zoom posture in sitting that's that context. It might be different than sitting on a chairlift at a ski resort, or maybe sitting on a bench at a sports stadium, or sitting at a pub. They're all going to be different arrangements. But if we could take those arrangements into our everyday sitting to shift internally, perhaps things would be a lot easier. So I talked about the Zoom posture, and I didn't realize, I'm sorry, the slides are a bit foggy here, but there's something called the whole you in the University of Washington, which I wasn't aware of. So it helps to do workshops and search a bit. But how sitting has magnified our sedentary lifestyle. The typical American sitting like 21 hours, or at least sedentary, in bed or couch or chair or car or traffic. Activities like maybe 3 hours out of the day, walking between places or having a routine. And then this idea that sitting down is slowly killing us. There's just attributions of epidemiological studies about the long-term effects of sitting that they're extracting. And so, yeah, we weren't meant to sit in one place and focus on minute details. We're meant to be more diverse than that in multisensory ways. And of course, there's the posture advice again. If you're slouched sitting in your chair, oh, bad posture, don't do that, do this instead. And people can be prescribed posture or stretches or yoga at the computer. And then the moment they're back in their task, the Zoom meeting, that context, that discriminative stimulus reconstitutes our habituation toward the Zoom posture or the task posture of completing a paper or a work task. And so there's something about prescriptive information that's verbal and extrinsic to our body and prescriptive and explicit that we can understand consciously. But there's an implicit body map, our background body schema that's beneath our surface that doesn't really correlate or interpret or adjust or adapt to those taken for granted verbal admonishments. Sit straight, you know. Where? What sits straight? There's our head, neck, shoulders. So there's a way to maybe tap into a moving mind below our conscious level. And so much of our brain and central nervous system is really devoted just to having us apprehend various shapes in our environment from balance points in our body that are constantly fluctuating in such a way that you think, from the ground up, medulla, spinal cord, cerebellum, the little brain that has a lot to do with so much of a foundation, and then the midbrain, things like basal ganglia that affects the Parkinson's, and then all the way up and through to maybe sensory motor cortex of the brain, and the visual and auditory and perceptual, so that our frontal lobes are like the icing on the cake that are available just because our embodied cognition developed as a foundation for everything that maybe makes us human. So it's icing on the cake. So let's experience an experiment here. Drummers, musicians need to sit to practice, and they have drums available that are around them, so they can at least vary their attention beyond a single screen. But let's say that some drummers had an injury, like a motor vehicle accident, and they became sort of weak after bed rest and recovery. And they went to a common place and said, okay, your neck is stiff, just do range of motion exercises. Turn to the left, hold for a count of 5, turn to the right, hold for a count of 5. Oh, your neck is slumped, axial extension, you This is my most least favorite thing. You push the space between the base of your nose and your upper lip, the mustache area, right? Backward to correct your forward head posture, hold your shoulders back, and then go about your way, Now, as I just corrected myself, I go to reach for my mouse or my button on the keyboard, I already feel intrinsic stiffness from prescribing a background posture that's not compatible with the task. And one of my trainers and teachers said that when the brain thinks about movement, it doesn't think muscles like glutes or abs or biceps or triceps. It does in a verbal way. But in everyday life, when we're looking to orchestrate ourselves, the body-brain map orchestrates this plethora of sensory motor inputs, associations within and outputs to select a proportion of fibers from various parts of our trunk and torso and extremities, feet to head to hands and eyes, and almost like a galactic orchestration of coordination so that we can meet a task in real place and in real time. The moment we think of one muscle, well, it gets a compartmentalization out of synergy with the rest of ourselves. That's a pervasive habit we have, whether we know it or not. So there's these two roads to improvement. Again, there's one idea of, okay, anatomical muscle groups. There's deep muscle groups that need to be stabilized, like core muscles, the core craze, right? Core stabilization, core activation. It's prescribed in a submaximal kind of way, but it's the craze. It's the fitness craze, right? And then when your core is stabilized, now your spine is protected so that now you're able to kind of maintain your deep contractions in a way that allow your core to be stabilized and challenged through arm movements. Well, anyway, even as I do that, I don't feel quite as free. There's another idea that says maybe rather than thinking about muscles being anatomically labeled, partitioned out, and some may be more important than others for certain reasons, maybe there's an idea of spatial references all around us. Certainly that's what our ancestors thought about with saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths and other tribes, that three-dimensional space and maybe our position in it is maybe what can be attended to a different way. So again, a lot of these popular approaches, and I experienced this in conventional physical therapy, my practice or hearing from others, that there's the idea of finding faults. There's some kind of a pathological category or shortcoming, like a weak core, poor gluteus recruitment, tight hamstrings. And even when you find faults, the idea is to correct them. Hold this, move that. Move this, hold that. Do this, but keep your back straight, this kind of thing. And it's kind of like a deficiency focus. Something doesn't measure up, it's not being done right, something's wrong. There's these isolated corrective solutions. Go on YouTube, you'll say exercises for a back or yoga poses for a back, Pilates routines for the back or for the neck or for the shoulder. You'll see a lot of it's kind of the same patterns, the same routines, the planks, palm down on your back, on your side. And it's just being generalized into something, right? So, and you're following an external authority, somebody outside you that you want to imitate or emulate perhaps, but they're completely different from you in terms of proportions and life history. Whereas the other road to improvement can be this idea of discovering hidden opportunities. The question I see with a client that comes to me on the table I work with lots of chronic pain conditions and some athletic persons as well, that are high functioning and all this, but they're looking for an edge that's different than usual routines. But I ask, is there something inherent within this particular person that can better serve them, but yet they're not aware of? And rather than correcting them, you embellish what's already there. This becomes possibility focused, maybe life affirming that something that's already happening. There's a novel, potentially pleasurable access point to incorporate next steps that just haven't been explored yet. And you invite these introductions and inquiries into oneself to explore relationships. So there's exercise prescription, which people never really follow. Home exercise programs don't have a whole lot of adherence that therapists prescribe or trainers prescribe. It's much akin to New Year's resolutions, just falling off, right? That's just unless you're really dedicated or have some other deeper meaning of satisfaction and time, a lot of these exercises that are prescriptive don't really feel interesting. They're the same thing each day, add a few more repetitions, and the variation seems to kind of lack until you have your next visit. Then they maybe add more numbers of repetitions or a slight variation. In our practice, each time someone comes in, we do something completely different each day. It's almost like spray painting an invisible object. And each time a person comes in, there's a spray painted access to some other component of that person, that something that was invisible before becomes revealed. And so let's suppose someone came in and said, okay, the drummer is at the drum kit. They go to the therapy office of the personal trainer professional, which I appreciate in many ways, but there's a lot of schooling and education that has been indoctrinated from past thinking that hasn't quite advanced yet. And so let's say somebody discovers something where, okay, I felt your abs, you tightened the right side, left side, the right side feels weak. Maybe you're side bent over the drum kit more. So you got to strengthen your right abs. And now, and I noticed that as you sit, you're kind of sloshed over your right sit bone. So maybe that glute needs to be strengthened. And then now I see that you're using that drum kit, like accelerator gas pedal to hit the bass drum. As you do that, I see your ankle is, you had a sprained ankle in your past. I'm seeing that doesn't really align in a synergistic axis so well, or something like this. It's too deviated into supination because you're protecting your ankle or something, you know. So each of you in the audience, I don't see you necessarily, but I can guide you to follow what I'm about to say. And with a replay, people at home can do the same thing. So if you come to the front edge of your seat where you are, and what I'd like you to do is just drive home from your appointment of the therapy office or the personal trainer's consult, and think, okay, you had 3 things that were false. And you're thinking, before you do anything to play drums or work at your computer, or hopefully not while driving, slowly but surely contract the right side of your rib cage. And by that, I don't mean contracting your rib cage that you pull yourself into side bending off to the right, but you're suddenly contracting the right side of your rib cage in such a way that someone sitting across center wouldn't know you were doing it, but you know you're doing it because you're doing it. So just contract your right rib cage and just stay there a moment and let it go. You're activating your right core, right? Something like that, maybe. So you got that. Now, the next time you slowly and surely contract the right side of your rib cage, just to brace it a little bit, to activate it, could you also activate your glutes by tightening your right buttock? Just press your right buttock maybe into the seat under you if you're sitting. If you're standing, you can just stand and press your right buttock. You might notice that your right leg seems to straighten a bit more. So that's the second part, right? And now a third part you thought about, certainly not while driving, is to maybe press your right heel into the ground to have like a fixture for your ankle axis. So press your right heel into the floor and release it. And this might be like a contract, relax maneuver to muscle energy technique to maybe lengthen your Achilles or something, you know. So yeah, you press your heel on the floor and let that go. Okay, now suppose you wanted to say, oh, well, we got to do all these together to coalesce it into a synergy. We'll call it a pattern. So do all 3, maybe in a sequential slight order. 1, contract the right side of your rib cage. 2, contract your right buttock. 3, press your heel into the floor. And just do that and call that a pattern. Like you're doing it and you're proud that you can do it. And you're looking around and then you let it go. You do 3 sets of 10 like that every day. And maybe after, they said 21 days is a new habit, but it's not true. That's a myth. It's actually 66 or more. It's an individual thing. But what I'd like you to do now is maybe stand on your feet, stand up on your feet. And while you're on your feet, go ahead and contract the same pattern in the sequential order. You're standing on your feet to take a break from sitting. 1, contract the right side of your rib cage. 2, press your right buttock. 3, press your heel onto the floor. And notice what that does. Where do your eyes go? What happens to your breathing? And let that pattern go. And now do it again. Right side of rib cage, right buttock, right heel. Stay in that pattern in a subtle way and pretend someone, an old friend you hadn't seen in a while since pre-pandemic, it was post-pandemic, came in, you wanted to shake their hand, but keep this pattern of contraction while you go to reach out to shake someone's hand. What happens in your shoulder or your neck, the neck that was supposed to be helped by stabilizing your core or something, right? Oi, it probably feels like you're working against yourself, right? Because you're isolating these contractions based on prescriptive muscle groups that had deficits, deficiencies, supposedly. And wow, you can feel how just superimposing an agenda maybe gets in the way of just maybe a smarter brain. That the idea that our background body schema's nervous system that's evolved over many, many millennia is maybe smarter than our ideas that we have about them in daily practice or daily life or social media or YouTube, or, you know, maybe you're your own expert and you need an internal map to develop that you can rely on in a portable, adaptive kind of way. So that's a new idea, maybe an older sense. Let's take a look and look at something much deeper, look at something deeper. At this point, I'm going to stop my screen share. And I presume I can be seen and full screen outside my PowerPoint. So let me just take a rest here a minute. So there's a deeper sense, a hidden sense. You ask a 5-year-old kid, what are the 5 senses of the body? They'll say seeing, smelling, tasting, hearing stuff, right? And then touching stuff around you. Are there really 5 senses that serve us? Or are there other senses, forgotten senses? 1, proprioception, our sense of our body in space. Kinesthesia, our sense of movement, or maybe extrasensory perceptions without being psychic. But there is a certain component of position and movement that is deep inside my skull-brain connection here. I'll see if I can pull it out of my head here. There's a visual magic right there. Here's my ear. Here's my inner ear. Boom, there it is. I found it. This is a trick I decided to do. Why not? Why not make this entertaining? And thank you for being here Thursday night. So what I have here are the semicircular canals of our inner ear, these 3 loops. I'm very interested in these, not beyond dizziness and balance and vestibular. This is called vestibular system, meaning entryway, or labyrinth, like a hidden maze is another name for these structures. The blue part is for balance and equilibrium, the loops that is, but the snail shell type coil is the cochlea for hearing. And the idea that hearing and orientation in space is also related to the balance of our body and our orientation in space. So I subscribe to the idea that this is a skull organ, not just a hearing organ, but an orientation of our head type organ. As it turns out, the nerve outputs from this special sense receptor has multiple pathways to our eyes and our spine. There's vestibular ocular reflexes, there's vestibular spinal reflexes that really impact our quality of movement. With our heads being so stable in this modern world of computer use and going to exercise and keeping our posture or whatever, it might be that the readiness for action just isn't quite as what it could be with the stasis of our heads, yeah? And so let's take a look at doing an experiment now. Why not just go into something interactive? What I'd like you to do is a range of motion experiment. I talked about, it shows you that diagram of people turning their heads and doing their range of motion exercises, you know. So let's ask everybody to stand up. Well, no, let's stand up first. Let's stand up and do an experiment. So stand on your feet. I'll pretend I'm standing. I gotta stay on screen, so. And now while you're standing on your feet, could you go ahead and just either close your eyes or have your eyes half open, half closed, and just sense how you're standing. Do you gravitate a preference to stand over on one leg compared to the other? Does one foot have more of a direct footprint compared to the other? This is awareness to movement, comparing and taking in some baseline information. Now imagine you had a special suit that didn't have buttons in the front or zippers in the front, but you had zippers on the sides of your body. It was like a scuba gear suit. One zipper went from the depth of your right underarm down the side of your torso, not the front, not the back, but the side of your torso. And it went down from your right underarm down to your outer, your ribs, to your outer abdomen, to outer pelvis, outer hip, outer thigh, maybe to your knee, to your outer ankle. And just sense the length of that zipper up and down on the right side. And now pause a moment and shift your attention to your left side of yourself and do the same for your left side. And just sense the length of your two sides. And does one side feel more oriented to feel shorter based on habit or preference, or even just our design intrinsically? We're not 100% symmetrical internally. The heart is off to one side to the left. Because of that, the lung is more like two lobes, upper and lower, with a remnant of the middle lobe. Right lobe has three. Kidneys are asymmetrical in our body. Our internal organs aren't necessarily symmetrical. Our body isn't meant to be like a statue, like a lot of fitness routines or even some Tai Chi before the actions can be prescribed. All right, so just notice that. Now, while you're there, I'd like you to experiment with side tilting your head. Well, assess the midline of your face first. Midline of your face, if you had a line from each earlobe to shoulder tip, does your head feel closer to one of your shoulders? Are you already tilted to one side? And whether or not you can sense that yet or not, go ahead, do a preliminary experiment of tilting your head to the right. And as you tilt your head to the right, do you put more side bending over your right ribs in such a way that you overload your right leg and a pure side bending? Just do that a couple of times and see if you go to your right leg, that might be an option that's common. Or some of you might notice that as you side tilt your head to the right, there can be a tendency to maybe counter-gravitate or migrate. Your pelvis shifts to the left, to your opposite left foot. Now, that might be more of a possibility if you had water in your ear and you wanted to empty your right ear of water after swimming. Have that purpose of tilting your head to empty water out of your ear. Feel what that's like when you tilt your head to the right. Maybe there's a migration towards your opposite left leg. That is, for every increment that your head tilts right, there's a corresponding increment of your pelvis shifting over your left foot or leg. Now, stand for a moment. Contrast the idea that you have, like, if you had tightness on your left side of your neck, and someone said, tilt your head to the right to stretch the left side of your neck, have a muscle purpose, like to stretch the scalene muscles, right? Tilt your head to the right that way, you'll notice that the quality is a lot different. The brakes might feel like they're put on sooner. Yeah. And I'll go back to have a purposeful intent. You had water in your right ear, empty your right ear of water, you'll find that maybe your whole torso migrates and shifts. That's just a test movement. People with back problems, they can lay on the table. I say, bend your knee and contract your right buttock to bridge up half of your buttock. And they can struggle and strain and tighten because I'm having them get the gluteus to activate or something. But then if I say, okay, pretend you're on a beach, you fell asleep on sand, and I came by and said, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry to disturb you. My son buried his Hot Wheel cars underneath where you're sleeping. Oh, I see a fender sticking out. I'm sorry, could you mind rolling up? And they can press their foot and roll up. The patient or client rolls so much easier when they have a functional purpose behind their action versus a muscle prescription. Okay, so maybe you're still standing. And if you have trouble standing, you can always sit down and stand up again. But now, can you go ahead and take your head to the left and just, do the intention of stretching your neck muscles on the right. Feel it's kind of like a co-contraction. To stretch muscles actually activates muscle spindles, embedded fibers, intrafusal fibers in muscles, whose job it is to not let us overextend ourselves. When things are behaving tight, they're actually hypersensitized, and stretching actually activates that reflex to tighten more. So there's other ways to orient. Suppose you had to empty your left ear of water, and as you tilt your head to the left, perhaps you might notice, is it possible for your lower body to side shift congruently over your right leg to counterbalance you? So just compare the idea of side bending left, falling over your left foot, right, versus side bending left to counterbalance over your right foot. Okay. So have a seat now. Sit down in your seats. And if some of you have rolling stools like a desk chair, if it's possible to have a chair that doesn't roll for some of these next steps, that would be all right too. What I'd like to do is go ahead and do another range of motion experiment where we did some side bending just now, but you're at the front edge of your seat. Before we look at turning our heads, just notice you're sitting now too. Do you habitually gravitate to prefer to sit on one sit bone compared to the other, or do they seem pretty equal? Does one sit bone seem forward of the other, toward the front edge of the chair versus the back edge of the chair? Do you feel twisted or oriented in one direction? How does that relate to your commute? If you extend your right leg to find the gas pedal and brake, what happens to the orientation of your pelvis and spine with the extension of one leg, especially onto a gas pedal that doesn't bear weight? Do you topple? Do you have to hold back? Place your foot under you again, sitting with maybe vertical lower legs, and see how that's different. Now, go ahead and do a movement experiment. I presume you're sitting in a room where there's something to the right of you that might be an object on the wall to the right of you, and something to the left of you might be an object to the left of you. Turn your heads to the right as if to see what captures your attention first, and have that correspond with where you happen to stop without stretching. We'll call that your end range of motion. Instead of measuring with a protractor tool like therapists use, these kinds of things, you're using your internal reference to turn and sense and see how far you can see to the right without straining, where you happen to stop. In your line of vision is a reference. Whatever that reference is, mark it as a reference that matches, we'll call your end range rotation right, turning right. So everybody have a reference to the right? Good. And now orient yourself to look to the left, the world to the left of you. And notice where you happen to stop. And notice that there's an end zone. And you know, if you go to strain and work further, maybe you're working against yourself, but just where you happen to stop, your end range without straining. Yeah. It might be less than what you did to the right. It might be more than what you should did to the right. Most people have one side that's more accessible. It's rare to find both equal on the fly. So if you had a limitation, let's say looking to the right or looking to the left, if I could see people that could raise their hands and say, okay, more people had trouble looking left versus right. Let's just say looking to the right, you had a limitation that stopped. And rather than do range of motion exercises to stretch or to hold your core and feel how that impedes your action, let's do something different that involves this inner ear organ I just had, this hidden sense. Here it is, yeah, this one, yeah. So what I'd like you to do is to reference this. I'd like you to hold up your right index finger as if to say number one, and then place the right finger in your ear, the ear hole, just not to poke a big deep hole, just to have it in the entranceway of your outer ear, say, where the hole is, yeah? And now if you're wearing glasses, it might be helpful to raise your lenses or not, but have your left index finger also point like number one, and direct your index finger to point directly into your right eye. If you're a contacts lens wearer, maybe you could touch your eye. That's something I'm not sensitized for that well, but just at the threshold of contacting your eye, like you have eye identity, yeah? And so your left finger is pointing front to back, from your front of your eye to the skull back. Your right finger is pointing through your right ear. If they are both laser beams, the right index finger go through your right ear and out your left ear. The left front-facing finger would be pointing through your eyeball to the back of your skull. Okay, rest your arms. For some, the shoulders feel kind of challenged by doing that. And if that's true, just go ahead and take a break from it. And now, let's do something a bit different that's interesting. Suppose you put your right hand by your ear like you have to listen to somebody far away. Your right hand is behind your ear like you're saying A, right? Without going to Canada, you know. So you're there, you're looking to hear something. So now you shift onto your right sit bone as if somebody slightly above you in a room above you to the right has something interesting to say. You shift it onto your right sit bone. Now place your right finger in your right ear, your left finger in the front of your eye, and notice if your arms feel looser just by shifting your body first. Now, reconstruct those two laser beams, the one that goes right ear to left ear and front eyeball to back of skull. Notice inside your head is a cross point where the two beams cross. Where that cross point happens is the location of your inner ear organ. I'd like you to visualize a miniature Ferris wheel. It's a vertical loop. Have it go maybe clockwise forward or counterclockwise backward. And adjacent to that, notice a merry-go-round, horizontal loop. And that's for having our eyes counterbalanced left and right. And between those two loops, maybe a tilted Ferris wheel that's diagonal, kind of out to the side of you and up would be a tilted Ferris wheel. That's for side tilting movements. And now rest your arms and settle your sitting. And just notice if you close your eyes, just sense the world to the right of you. There's a sense that maybe the wall to the right of you or the references to the right of you, maybe your whole right side of yourself, even just present, feels more open or present in some way compared to your left side, which might feel less highlighted. And now, one more time, go ahead and place your right finger in your right ear again. But this time with your left finger, could you point that to direct to the inside corner of your left eye, adjacent to your nose bridge? So now, I'd like each of these laser beams in your imagination to become one beam that connects the dots from left fingertip to right fingertip. So you can aim your right ear fingertip to point toward your left inner tear duct, inner eye fingertip, to have them form one beam. And just have a sense that that one beam represents the orientation of how your inner ear sits inside the skull. It faces outward to navigate the world. If it faced inward, your skull would feel pretty crowded, and it'd be like a horse blinder. You'd be kind of cut off from your world a little bit. So that's the orientation. It faces outward to monitor, yeah? And rest your arms again. And just maybe notice the height of your shoulder after doing that too. As I look at my two shoulders, I'm recalibrated a little bit that my right shoulder is a little bit rested downhill from my left one without trying. It's like a reflex thing. And now one more time, go ahead, put your right finger in your right ear again, left finger in the right, not in the right eye, but facing the right eye, okay. And so reconstruct the perpendicular laser beams. Right fingertip is right to left fingertip is front to back, anterior, posterior, yeah. And feel where they cross inside your skull. And just visualize those three loops for orientation in 3 dimensions. Up and down, side to side, tilted. And just let that rest totally. And now while you're sitting there, go ahead and look over your right shoulder. Someone called your name. And just see how far you see now. Turn your heads to calibrate that original movement that we did. And just notice how far you see might have been expanded. Maybe some people turn twice as far, maybe, or at least quite a bit more. I see Elizabeth nodding her head. She's the only one I see. But the other of you who are behind the screens can stay there. Much further I see in the chat. Okay. Yeah. Now what's interesting is, okay, stay with that just for a moment. That's good. Even if you do it again, you turn to the right again, it's still probably pretty free. Now, if you slowly turn your face to the left side, you'll notice that side feels kind of dulled or entrenched or stuck. And I could ask you, if you have New Year's resolutions to go out and hit trails and exercise and throw javelins or, ski or hike or hunt or fish or throw footballs or something, chances are the right side feels much more available to your environment and those New Year's resolutions than accessing your left side of your world. Yeah. So that's an important factor. And so there you have it. Okay. So we could work with the left side again and do the whole thing on the left side. You can repeat it. But because of the time constraints that we've got, let's add another piece to this that can help to maybe synergize and connect this head-neck relationship in another way. So we can say, okay, you gotta turn left, practice turning left again. But what was interesting, here's my point, highlighting this central hidden sense of our inner ear, which is specialized in the detection of change and orientation of space and detecting change in our center of gravity falling out from under us. Just highlighting that special sense improved our movement. We didn't stretch any muscles. We didn't adjust any vertebrae. We didn't prescribe any stretching. It happened by itself through highlighting hidden senses. Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. So there's my website information, great. And so we'll cover that toward the end as well. All right, so now let's do something that can be of interest another way. Go ahead and you're at the front edge of your seat. Let's do it, just stand up again. Stand up just for a brief time. And maybe even if you stand on your feet, maybe the right foot might feel under you a different way too. But let's try this idea. Sit down again on the front edges of your chair. And now, I'd like you to imagine maybe a future time or even a past time where you boarded a crowded bus on a way to an event, and there was only one seat left that you couldn't sit fully on the seat, but your right buttock had to sit off the edge of the seat. So as long as your chair doesn't have wheels under it, or if it has wheels, but it's a stable carpet, be careful if you do have wheels, but sit on the outside edge of your chair in such a way that your right buttock is downhill, sagging. So you're half on your chair, that'd be your left buttock sit bone. You're half off your chair, the right buttock sit bone. And now while you're there, you're lopsided. You are half on, half off, right? Right half of you is off the chair, left half's on the chair. And now make a movement, we kind of did it earlier in a different, where you press your right foot into the ground to maybe level your pelvis so you're sitting level again. So as you press your right foot, you're leveling your pelvis. So if it's sinking down here, you press your foot, you level your pelvis so it's even with your left sit bone and the platform of the chair. Yeah. And feel what that's like. What's the continuity through your body to press your right foot? If you do that 3 sets of 10, what would tire and fatigue? And I'll just let that rest. Come to the bulk of your chair. So both sides are even at the front edge of your chair. And rest a bit. And if you felt weak or less connected doing that, like it'd be kind of a strain potentially, some of the answers in therapy and training is, well, okay, just practice doing that maybe half as much, do it a little bit more, get used to it, it'll get stronger. Are we strengthening a faulty pattern of frustration, or are we really strengthening the muscle activity? It'll go different ways with different folks, but I would subscribe to say that if we're just repeating the same thing over and over again, exactly the same way, we're really not changing anything. We're just going through the repeated motions. The architecture of neurology is not shape-shifting. Let's take a look at shape-shifting another way then. Come to the side of your chair again, let your right buttock drop off the edge if you're able to do that. And now while you're there, you can think about pressing your right foot from bottom up, or you can think about, okay, if you tilt your head to the right, maybe tilt your head to the right at the same time. And you might feel the ribs kind of come together and it doesn't feel as congruent as you'd like. Or if you sit and just side tilt your head, we did that. But that's kind of hard to do. Or you can maybe frame your head and have your ribs contract the right side of your ribs again. Still feels hard to do in some ways, yeah. But now go back to this inner ear organ. And to magnify this, as we're half on a chair, half off a chair, the right side's lopsided down, place 2 fingers together, index and middle in each hand, and place both of those in your ears. And your elbows are kind of horizontal, like vertebrae wings, yeah? Now, a lot of people, when I'm talking or lecturing, this happens spontaneously. You know, I cover there, that's just a joke. But anyway, so your fingers are in your ears, all right. So, all right, so now, what I'd like you to do is imagine that there's water in your right ear again, that reference. And as you begin to be on the threshold of pressing your right foot, think about emptying your right ear of water. And as you do, have a sense that your right elbow points downhill toward the floor. The left elbow points uphill toward the corner of where your wall meets your ceiling. And then come back again. And have a sense that both ends are working toward each other. And you're looking to orchestrate upper body and lower body to come together. The ribs fold on the right, they expand on the left. And that's initiating with the foot and then blending the head, letting the proximal core of the low back activate first, and then the head counterbalancing. Contrast that to tilt your head first. And then try pressing your right foot up. You'll see it's kind of lopsided that way. So that's one of our principles, letting the lower body activate first, not hold the core position, but mobilize your proximal part of yourself. The larger areas, our pelvis and hips, are larger areas, and activating that first is just a more efficient use of our inherent physics. So go ahead and press your right foot, raise your pelvis, and then side tilt your head. Just feel how that works. And now the next time you side tilt your head, the next time you synergize, raising your pelvis, pressing your right foot, and side tilting your head, stay there like a statue. And so while you're there, your pelvis is kind of behaving level, keeping your elbows where they are. Could you, just with your eyes only, soften your vision with your eyes only, and migrate your eyes to look up and left toward your left elbow, and then down and right towards your right elbow. And so that feels kind of tricky to do because you're just referencing the elbows. Rest a moment there. And then sit in your chair all the way for a moment. And just notice the presence of your right sit bone. If you close your eyes and put your right hand on your right knee and left hand on your left knee, there might be this phenomenon of your right leg feeling a bit larger than your left leg. And that sensory phenomenon is like evidence of neuroplasticity, the brain's remapping its body map through novel constructive experience that you just don't see every day. Right? You don't see these things every day in fitness gyms, you know. It's like kindergarten. That's where things really get wired, right? So speaking of kindergarten, we look for toys in our environment, things that are maybe of interest. So I could visualize that these inner loops are actually inside our skull, but we could have them fall out of our skull and become toys, okay? Strange, but let's just go ahead. Come to the right, come sit on the left side of the right side of your chair in such a way that your right pelvis drops down, and place your head in your ears again, the fingers in your ears again, as we did. So you got 2 fingers in your right ear, 2 fingers in your left ear. And now this time, as you press your right foot and side tilt your head, you arrive at a point where you shift onto your left sit bone, right? Like if you were in a sailboat, you'd be kind of leeward to the left, yeah? Keep your head tilted and your pelvis elevated. Your right sit bone doesn't touch the ground. And I'd like you to imagine that maybe your right inner ear organ fell out behind your heel. And so your eyes could track down as if to look behind your right buttock and heel for the missing inner ear organ that fell out of your skull. And notice, come back forward again, have your eyes look up and left and look down and right to track the organ that fell like a marble. Marbles came out of that, lost my marbles. They fell behind the right heel. And the head will move, the ribs will move, but let the eyes really be something that happens. And notice as you look down and right, maybe your right leg gets shorter and retracts into the hip socket. As your eyes look up and left, maybe your right knee gets longer toward your forefoot and toes. Good, let that rest. And again, notice the right half of your body compared to the left half. Look over your right shoulder, but now look over your left shoulder. And maybe by side bending and orienting your eyes, maybe your head can turn left easier too. Yeah. And one last time, this is a lot for a Thursday night, but go ahead, be on the right edge of your seat again, press your right foot, elevate your head. Elevate your pelvis and tilt your head the same direction. And now imagine that the left inner organ could come out of your skull and hover above your left elbow toward the ceiling in front of you. So you look up and left, where the wall is to the left of you. So look up and left to see your inner ear organ hovering like a hovercraft. Then look down and right to see the one that fell out of your right ear. And just go back and forth like that. Now, as you go up and left, maybe your right knee gets longer. As you look down and right, maybe your right knee gets shorter. So your pelvis is moving kind of automatically without thinking. In fact, if you think about it, you'll be in your own way. So you're kind of letting these hidden connections happen. And as I look around, my head back feels quite a bit looser. You know, I could be the drummer in that drum kit and just play and look around. But if I tighten my core and stiffen and correct my posture, I'm not as good of a drummer anymore. I'm hamstringed in some ways, yeah. So now come to standing. I had you stand before. And now this time as you stand on your feet, notice your alignment over both feet. Oh, your shoulder feels less tight. Great, excellent. So now if I'm standing, I tilt my head to the right and then come back to the middle. You might notice, or even tilt my head to the left, you might notice the pelvis and sacrum is almost like a pendulum on a grandfather clock that swings. Notice that when you take your head to the right, I'm wagering to believe that your pelvis migrates over your left foot. When you come back to the middle and tilt your head left, I'm wagering that you counterbalance almost more spontaneously to arrive over your right foot. Then when you sit down, maybe you're more balanced in your seat. And exercises happen so that if you had to go out for like a walk or a run as a work break, you're more primed to do that than had you just focused that. So any of these things we've done can be little mini reminders because they're still pretty novel. You might discover inclusions of new places that weren't there before. Now, let me go stop my screen share and see if I can find my good old-fashioned PowerPoint again. There it is, I believe. Do we see that, Elizabeth? And I don't, okay, great. So, yes. Great, okay. So let me go ahead and migrate my, there it is, okay, good. Took a while for this. So it's awareness of inherent possibility. Where are you in space? You pinpoint your balance organs in your inner ear. We did a movement lesson. And by the way, the bone that surrounds that inner ear organ is the densest bone in the body. And I have a virtual reality bones program as part of my dissertation where we highlight, especially for chronic low back pain situations, not core muscles, but core skeleton, pelvis, hip, opposite head and inner ear. And that group did much better in the outcomes than traditional physical therapy. Yeah. All right. So we did this idea. This is a review of what we did. We pointed to find we indexed the location of our inner ear's location and its orientation. And the Feldenkrais method, which is kind of where this practice is based, we create individualized multimodal learning experiences. It means we're using different imagery, imagination, seeing, hearing, sensory relationships to cultivate an experience in such a way that our perception of ourselves and our action capacities are revamped in a way where we don't think or feel ourselves a different way. For every moment, our quality of feeling, sensing, thinking, and acting is just more integrated in almost a spiritual kind of way. And so this is what Feldenkrais said, a brain without a body cannot think. And a British researcher who looks at biological cross-references across the lifespan of organisms evolutionarily, claims that we have a brain for one reason only, and that's to produce adaptable and complex movements. There is no other plausible explanation. Leonardo da Vinci, this is on a brick wall somewhere in downtown Tacoma, an outbuilding. All knowledge has its roots in our perceptions. So again, this embodiment quality so much of our brain is devoted just to keeping us upright and perceiving our environment and ourselves in it, that everything else is icing on the cake. I think next time I do a presentation, I'll look for some kind of image where somebody makes a cake mold out of a brain and there's frosting on the cake. The frosting is our everyday consciousness, but maybe the bulk of that cake is more rooted in our body representation and everything that's correlated to it, like algebra, mathematics, geometry, sense of space, causation, hypothesis, all that stuff needs a body too. And so the main benefit of exercise is improved neuroplasticity, the body changing, the brain changing itself to adapt to new demands. And neurogenesis, actually new pathways and sprouting. The neurogenesis actually, yeah, there are some new nerve cells that can still be produced, contrary to popular older science. Brain-derived neurotropic factor is the hormone that generates these connections. Synaptic proliferation. I will wager to say that your body representation of head, inner ear, ribs, pelvis, foot probably has some new connections that have sprouted just in these last 20 to 30 minutes than what your entire life experience prior to infant development, or post-infant development has happened. Your prior recent history probably hasn't linked these together until now. And each time you do awareness through movement lessons, the pelvis hip relationships in the head will help cultivate that. And that cultivates the aerobic factors for vascular development, vascular health of the brain, and this evidence now of cognitive reserve that Alzheimer's and dementia, they're comparing larger meta-analysis type studies, comparing studies across the globe and showing that exercise has an effect of protecting from dementia and loss of cognition, retaining cognitive reserve. But it's not just about mindless repetition of routines and that are the same thing each day. Dr. Rady, MD, has a book called Spark about the physiology of exercise and brain development. And Manning, they wrote a book called Wild about just the Paleolithic lifestyle of getting back to our roots again. That simplistic, short-sighted, single-factor fixes, which lots of gadgets happen to embody technologically outside our body. The ones that sort of isolate a muscle group and ignore the evolutionary holistic design of our entire body, they often create more problems than they solve. A case in point, maybe some orthotics that special running shoes for barefoot running, that trend. Yeah, barefoot running is a Paleolithic heritage, but we weren't running competitively on heel strike to forefoot to win a race. We were balancing on the midsoles of our foot to stalk prey and be aware to shapeshift backward or forward, the way a martial artist could. To be able to move in fact, this is what Feldenkrais said. He said, the aim of the work is a body that's organized to move in any direction with equal ease. And that's without hesitation or pre-preparation or technique, but a consciousness of how it all fits together, developed through the processes he developed. And so other, studies, this one out of Israel, that helping us to age better. Yes, there's metabolic demands of cardiovascular aerobic training. And when I don't get my bike in, or I have an elliptical bicycle too that I can ride on. It's like skiing, running, and bicycling at the same time. I've had 2 hip replacements actually, so this actually helps me to simulate running. And I didn't know I had dysplasia until later in life. I believe the Feldenkrais training that I had protected me and let me go quite a bit longer until I went sledding with kids and impacted something. And I thought it was just maybe a labrum tear, like cartilage, but no, I had advanced end-stage osteoarthritis and was fairly high functioning, but I decided to go ahead and get some new parts. But to help those parts work, this right half of your screen, the coordination, the balance, the neuromuscular demands of incorporating new parts in my body schema, help them to restore things that were lost from restriction before. Had I repeated old patterns, I probably wouldn't have changed, right? So how do we change a habit? Is it 21 days or 26 days. I could take an audience poll on chat or something. How many people believe that it's 21 days or less to change a habit? Or 66 days or more to change a habit? 21 days was sort of a motivational guru message for a lot of self-help and motivational programs, but actually it's 66 days, more than 2 months. And for me, it's not just a number of repetitions, but variation of themes that embellish not just a roadmap that's a single road, but maybe a whole network of highways and freeways and back roads that interlap and construct an old body like this, but maybe something like this that's just more harmonious and adaptable. If we stumble, it can reconstitute itself again and grow beyond that based with new information. So the idea of motivating these New Year's resolutions 66 days is maybe think about the pleasure principle. Get your kicks on 66. Let Highway 66 days. It's on my bucket list, as are many things pandemic transition here. But all animals, all humans, all sentient beings who have senses seek pleasure and avoid pain as a homeostasis type of mechanism, or even beyond homeostasis, something called hormonostasis, where we actually grow and proliferate beyond the standard norm. And we create conditions to make movement and thereby exercise more pleasurable, more interesting. Then it becomes maybe more automatic and spontaneous in your daily life. And when missed, you have this sense to begin to actually crave something that's missing. The same way you crave maybe another routine that's nutritionally enhancing. When it's missing, you know it's missing, you crave it. And another author, I do want to give credit. I'm sorry I didn't put it here. It's in the back here. He writes for Psychology Today a lot. Christopher Berglund's his name. He wrote a book called The Athlete's Way. That's where this comes from. Unbeatable ratio that if we have 168 hours in a week, just the idea of 20 to 40 minutes of some kind of cardio activity that accelerates your respiratory rate and heart rate. There's all the idea of 220 minus age and 80% of that for allostatic load of cardiovascular challenge. But even just more than what you usually do within the capacity that you can still talk, but maybe have breaths between talking, just that on most days, and then 20 to 40 minutes of something to exert something beyond what you're used to, but still feel awareness while you're doing it. And then coordinative exercises that are like what we just did to sort of reset your proportionality of whole self being internally sensed better, then take that tuned instrument of your whole self into action. Just doing a combination of those things for maybe what constitutes 3 hours out of your week, which is 2% of the time, can make a radical difference compared to the sedentariness avoidance of not doing something at all. So we have a lot of biological reserve where even if degenerative changes in our spine canals and vertebrae spaces, all these normal things that happen with aging and gravity, we have enough biological reserve that shouldn't impact and affect or hurt or bother us. And often a lot of these impediments are entrenched behaviors of neuromuscular rustiness more than they are like structural causation of inability. And to harness that, what physical therapy needs to do is move beyond the gymnasium and include something called the sensorium, sensing how you're put together from within. And augmenting the perceptual information can help us recalibrate our bodies so that, like we experienced, the movement's just more spontaneous and available. So the idea of, hey, let's go for a hike or an exercise doesn't feel so daunting. And in fact, when I do manipulation therapy, rather than look for a subluxation or something to fix, the 4-part series that I do that highlights skeletal density is the touch and movement as a way that demonstrates the pathways of our skeleton to support ourselves as internal scaffolding, so that the muscular activity can happen more naturally. So rather than say, here's a subluxation, here's your stiff muscle, here's this and that, and focusing on reinforcing an illness pathology, I've stopped looking for those. Instead, we outline the internal pathway of the inherent robustness of skeletal tensity, tensegrity and density continuities through the whole body as a whole, that the person develops a robust body schema in such a way that there's no more room for subluxations and pain. And more of that will happen, I believe, Elizabeth, you can remind me, it's June 30th, I'll be back with Marlene's, hopefully on site and present to do a workshop on the brain's, moving your brain beyond bodily pain, that the pathways in the brain is what perpetuates chronic pain long after tissue injuries have healed. Tissues heal, pathways persist, pain persists. It's only until we change the pathways through embodiment practices and sensory processes that are competing pathways that we can begin to overcome chronic pain. And that includes the emotional pathways as well as movement pathways. So in everyday movement, we're just sort of going through the motions. It's schematic. We go to reach for something, we're anticipating something, we're making corrections as we go, then we repeat. But there's really no change in background body schema. That's the model of most therapy exercises and conditioning. Efference means you're copying your action patterns over and over again. But there's a neuroplastic adjustment of working body schema in the background where I use articulation of skeleton models to project onto a person, through a person, for hidden things in hips and inner bridges of pelvis and rib connections and inner ear and skull connections, like the core of our skeleton. There's a way to create this pathway called an afference copy. I got a better schematic of this, but this will do for now. But we connect this this pathway of a revitalized connection of skeleton chain links in such a way that the body's map has to change and the quality of our actions changes with it. I have something offline I can show if there's more questions about it that's clearer. So yeah, I'm Alliant Physical Therapy and Integral Medicine is in Tacoma at the corner of North I Street and 2nd, across from Tacoma Little Theater. That's our main practice. We have a side practice in Olympia. I'm broadcasting now from my home in Gig Harbor, but we take most major insurance. And unlike conventional physical therapy, which has its place, you almost make a bell curve, okay? One extreme, most outpatient clinics are kind of oriented towards sports medicine, high-level athletes, a gymnasium, where you look at what's happening there, it doesn't really look much different than working with a professional personal trainer at a fraction of a price. That's where most practices in outpatient across North America and Europe are. It's like a fitness model. It's not that fitness isn't important. When we have compensations with chronic pain or injuries and recovery, that compensation pattern, that movement signature that's cut off in some places and over enabled in others, walks into a fitness routine and just takes the patterns of habituation and protection into these movements, into these routines. And we're just sort of reinventing what we already have. Each time you come to the Feldenkrais session, you look at, okay, here's how you present yourself before, and there's an adjacent piece that's missing and not participating. We do something hands-on and something movement sequential that maybe restores that missing parts of ourselves. And they get incorporated, and soon you find yourself functioning well. In fact, in the study group for the low back pain study, the group that didn't follow core muscle activation and internalize a sense of skeleton continuity from head to toe, they're able to hold things like sustained positions and planks much longer than the group that was practicing muscle activation. So yeah, fitness is important, has its place, but the prerequisite is a body that's organized. And I want to thank Elizabeth at Marlene's Market in Delhi for meeting me. I invited her to a summit I did last May, which is called Move Better, Feel Better. It's all over the world. Like maybe, I think 13,000 people registered or participated across Europe and Australia. And I felt very privileged to be a speaker for my, my dissertation research on chronic pain. and invited Elizabeth to that. And what's happened subsequent to that summit is I developed an online way to reach more people beyond Tacoma, Washington, North I Street, where SOBIS is almost my last name, Sobie, but the acronym stands for, well, SOBIS WellCare Solutions, but SOBIS is Synaptic Organization of Bodies or Beings Under Stress. I'll say it again, Synaptic Organization of Bodies Under Stress. And the idea that, that the research, latest research again is showing that, the quality of our physical activity increases presynaptic proteins at one end of this axon that you see here, nerve cell, to transmit more proliferative information to the opposite of the axon, then proliferate maybe more dendritic sprouting to other nerve pathways, and that the better whole brain communication becomes optimized through more augmented exchange between neurons. That's kind of neuroplasticity in a nutshell. I'd like to go ahead and stop sharing here. And I think what I'll do is, what I'd like to do is go ahead and just pull up one more screen share. And while I'm doing that, I would invite those of you who are interested in pursuing more work or opportunity with me to enter your email contact information in the chat. You can direct it to me directly or Elizabeth to stay private if you'd like. Or if you want to, if you don't mind sharing your email globally, then that's another idea. Let me take a look at my, oh goodness, I'll have to shrink this whole window. Let me escape my PowerPoint. That sounds like a nice idea too. Can I escape it? And let me go to my other window here and open my home page, just to give an overview there. And then we'll take some questions right after that. Yeah. All right, so that's open. Let me go to my Zoom screen and see if this comes up under my share. Yeah, and there it is, okay. All right, so there you can see a screen that says Experience SOBIS with Dr. Tim Sobie. So there's a clinic practice is modulating pain. Do you see that, Elizabeth? Like there's Olympic Mountains and somebody hiking on it. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
Yeah, so this is my first go at doing a website on my own. Decided to make it a one page, but this looks like a hurricane ridge in our great state of Washington Olympic National Park. Hiking on a nice semi-clear day in the Olympic National Park. But the clinical practice is basically modulating chronic pain. That's my main practice. Research design has to do with bodily interoception. Interoception has to do with bringing out what's already within ourselves, which educare, the Latin word for education, means too. You bring out what already is within. And this body interoception and interoception has to do with feeling where maybe our heart rhythms might be, or maybe where our gastric distress might be, or where our body sense might be. Stuff that semi-conscious can be more augmented to be made more conscious, biofeedback, neurofeedback, practices like that. And then online adventures is online workshops that are in development, which I really invite participants to contact me to help sponsorship as inaugural founders groups. Then finally, post-pandemic, especially for clinicians and practitioners of body work or movement therapy, physical therapist, chiropractic, body work, massage, yoga, movement therapies, offline retreats to learn how to teach through touch and movement, and internalization and emergence of this internal framework of virtual reality bonds. So scroll down is a brief biography, 3 agencies of integration. Yeah, there's a clinic practice, Alliant Physical Therapy and Medical Medicine. Elizabeth posted that link. This is timsobe.com, takes you to SOBIS WellCare. There's 4 courses in process right now in development. One is Fitness Beyond Exercise, where you take usual workout routines or floor movements or yoga poses and postures, and we develop more of a variation about them that becomes more automatic without routine rehearsal necessarily the same way. Breathing Fluids and Flow looks at things like seeing and sensing your heart's fluids, your craniosacral fluids, your breathing qualities, your lung volumes, and creating kind of a meditative space for that. That's like a BFF, best friend forever, always with you. Confident inner alignment has to do with looking at these inner air loops and internalizing 3 dimensions of space for your workspace as a cubicle or a desk. Is there a way to not just do ergonomic assessment, which I also do? You can send pictures of your work environment front and back. I can plug in different formulas and adjust your work heights and your distances for the ergonomic external environment. But confident internal alignment is about orchestrating your internal use of self at the workstation or in everyday life as a metaphor. Neutral, mid-range, maximum ease. These are all highly experiential. Then finally, self-adjusting spine might be more of a one-to-one hands-on or coaching or distant guidance of typical patterns of compensation above and below our spine that affect our spine. And then finally, the third column is virtual reality bones to teach workshops that are hands-on skills using interoceptive touch to touch people in ways where the synapses and the body schema changes, parts, not just parts, but wall frames of reference. And then finally, at the very end of the site, you can download a video workshop called Anti-Gravitizing Your Spine, where you compare diaphragms throughout the body and standing and walking, then you lay down and you balance them out. And it's a nice retreat for the new year and maybe motivating yourself for walking and guiding. Facebook isn't terribly active. LinkedIn, I'm looking at revising these things. My Twitter just happened this year. You know, I've been busy with other things, but I'm realizing there's a virtual world out there, potential blog, a YouTube channel has some old demonstrations of what I've done. But with that, I want to thank you all for participating, and especially Elizabeth for orchestrating this event. I'm going to go take a look at the chat myself. Highway 66 is an appreciated vote for real sustainable change isn't just a quick fix. It's a process. Life is a process. And the more we engage and highlight the process, the more that process serves us automatically as a new habit, a new set of orchestrations. All right. Are there any other questions this evening, or sharing your experience of what you experienced through the movement experiments that we did briefly midsection, or interest areas or questions that haven't been addressed with regards to health challenges or lifestyle challenges to date?
We did have some questions on Facebook. Would night guards from an orthodontist not be truly healing from bruxism? I'm probably pronouncing that terribly.
Bruxism is you know, clenching of the teeth is what bruxism means. Nocturnal bruxism. Is it the name of? Can I get a first name of the person just to address them?
D.
ID. So bruxism, as you know, is grinding of teeth at night. One of our trainers in New York, Feldenkrais. Bruxism, as you know, is grinding of teeth at night. Reverberating. I'm hearing this. New York, Feldenkrais. Bruxism, as you know, is grinding of teeth at night. There we are. There's some.
Oh, sorry about that.
Right, I heard a second version of myself. So bruxism, or at night, nocturnal grinding, is an involuntary activity that happens at nighttime. And another way that I like to, how it was characterized in a meeting with psychologists and biofeedback. There we are.
Oh, sorry about that.
Right, I heard a second version of myself. There we are. Parafunctional activity. We need teeth to clench, to bite and chew and swallow and feed. We don't need clenching of teeth to be a lifestyle. And so parafunctional activity is the clenching at night. And the night guard is an orthotic, and depending on how it's positioned or affected, it's designed by craniomandibular or TMJ, temporomandibular joint specialist dentists to give you a resting point from which to have a place to rest. Now, that's looking inside the mouth for a prospective solution, the same way that maybe a sling on an arm or a wrist could help with a wrist sprain or a knee sprain. But actually functioning with that, I'm looking to do actually a workshop to add where, you know, we look at the outside the mouth. There's a sensory motor learning for mouth and jaw program that has titles like this: jaw skull connection, jaw tongue connection, jaw spine connection, jaw eye connection, jaw breathing connection, jaw pelvis connection. We orient our pelvis, our jaw counterbalances. How awareness affects the jaw, stress mediation, how shoulders affect the jaw. There are movement experiments that reconstruct maybe a foundation below your neck and jaw outside the mouth that are not your occlusion, not how your teeth fit together, but affect your jaw together. Let's do another mini experiment for those who are there. I said side bend your head, feel your neck. If you have your jaw tense, side bend your neck, like you're frustrated about something. Ooh. Feel limits you right away. Or if your jaw, if you close your jaw on one side, say tighten, not tighten, just, you don't have to do this if it hurts certainly, but touch your teeth on the left side, but not the right. So it's out of balance. And then tilt your head to the right there. You might find that your head tilts easier on the closed side, which makes sense. If I was in skis and falling, I'd probably tense the side that's falling for initial impact and then learn to expand and distribute my impacts or something, you know. So I'd recommend to you that, you know, if you'd like to work with us referral-wise, there's Jennifer Yagos, this other practitioner who works with me, and myself. She's got beautiful skilled touch that teaches, and there's ways of not moving the jaw on the skull, but you can hold the jaw still and move the skull on the jaw and create these interesting reproportions of pterygoid muscles and masseters and temporal muscles without naming them. The tone balances, and you find that maybe you sleep better. There's also some breathing pattern things that can be explored that actually go to the sinus passages that feel a way of expanding the nasopharynx from within. There are muscles in our sinus passageways that clench too. So all this clenching in, New York Times had an article during the pandemic, especially initial phases, there was much more incidence of teeth fractures being seen by, you know, general dentistry. Something's going on as a stress response too. So we would be happy to help with that hands-on and through, and if not hands-on during pandemic and clinic, with mask wearing, it might be a bit challenging, but through telehealth, we could guide you through individualized chapters of this program that integrates components together to reorient a new construct for head, neck, and jaw to synergize and work together instead of against each other. And then you might find that oral splint, the occlusal splint orthotic, would become less necessary because your teeth don't have to clench together. That's the other thing to think about. Is this orthotic splint just like an orthotic for the feet? Maybe as an initial or a heel lift for maybe a leg length discrepancy where an injured back, there'll be a heel lift to equalize a leg length, which might be a good short-term thing to maybe provide support for an acute sprain or strain. But as a long-term lifestyle, it's superimposing an agenda that restricts other choices to happen. So yes, this splint might be a great thing for an acute rest position, but over time, maybe that prohibits other options for spaciousness in here between maxillary upper jaw and mandibular lower jaw. And maybe it's a crutch that reinforces the clenching. I call it clenching. Jaw tension, I call it clenching as a specific tension. But it might be more of a diversified experience to and then you'd find yourself not needing that anymore.
Also, Dee wanted to know if you accept insurance, and
Yes,
she said thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah, we're preferred providers of most major insurance, and I think that's gotten better. There was a time where they would limit, networks to like large organizations only. That's why I had a practice in Gig Harbor and Vashon Island and Olympia, in addition to Tacoma, the home office, to look bigger and get on provider roles. But to my knowledge, I think the only thing I'm not taking, some of the managed care DSHS programs, I think coordinated care, I gave up that one. But otherwise, Medicare, traditional Medicare insurances, private insurance, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Molina, United Health Plans, labor and industries for work injuries if that's required, car accidents and traumas, motor vehicle accident, most everything. But check with your insurer, and there might be plans within plans that are privy to certain physician groups and hospital organizations that exclude independent practitioners, which are kind of the dying breed. But I think that's happening less and less than what it used to. Just check with your insurance plan and contact our number. Erin at the front desk is 253-572-4611 or info@alliantcare.com. And she can verify your insurance programs as well.
Wonderful. Dee thanks you. And I also thank you to Dr. Sobie. Fantastic presentation, amazing expertise.
Well, thank you.
And definitely looking forward to June 30th.
Yes. Let me add something to that too that's in the works. I'm in touch with a documentary filmmaker who produced the film from a noted physician in the Detroit area. I'm from Michigan originally, but Dr. Howard Schubner specializes in the emotional components of chronic pain and sort of demedicalization of chronic pain in ways where persons can adopt the threat value being less and dig out of it and recover, not be in the fear avoidance mode, but be in the engagement mode. And he has groups and skills to facilitate that are beautifully referenced in this documentary film. So I'm looking to involve Marlene's Market and Deli and some local cinemas to sponsor that film in conjunction with some experiential workshops and hopefully hands-on demonstrations at Marlene's or through our practice, maybe an urban retreat for persons who really do need some options that aren't happening, that are more holistic and integrative in nature. So let's see what the global ecology of things with Omicron receding and worldwide vaccinations, interventions, preventions, making this more of an endemic that's manageable and augmenting our internal systems in addition to that for the summer and spring and beyond. Yeah.
Exactly. Yay. Thank you so much, Dr. Sobie. You are wonderful. And thank you everyone who tuned in tonight and watched on Facebook Live.
Yes.
And hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Take good care.
And wonderful continued resolutions to come to fruition. Okay.
For sure, yes.
All right, very good.